let's talk about medical racism, part one of, unfortunately, many. The function of your kidneys are to filter your blood, and in order to figure out how well they're functioning, you need to figure out how well they're filtering. This is something called the glomerular filtration rate, or the GFR. We use a muscle byproduct called creatinine to measure the GFR, which is good because all of it is filtered, but only a little bit is secreted. Because a little bit is secreted, the GFR is overestimated, so you have to calculate for that with the estimated GFR. Because of a questionable study back in the day that determined that black patients had higher creatinine levels than white patients, their estimated GFR is lower than those of white patients. This means that black patients will have a lower on average estimated GFR because of this African American GFR, and when that's used as a determinant for renal function, then that can keep patients off of renal transplant lists, which is why there's been a big push by medical students and physicians to get rid of this estimated African American GFR.
So here's something that I've been butting up against for the last days, months, years. House training. And by that, I mean the common sense, resourcefulness, constant vigilance, and allowance of indignity that characterizes growing up and being black in the United States is not a requirement for survival for white people. If white people need something, there's a service for it. If a white person is harmed, there's justice. And so white people are going through their lives with a simultaneous helplessness and air of entitlement that if I attempted to put on would get me killed. Right? If I tried that, I would be dead. And it manifests itself all throughout white people's lives, and I'm constantly confronted with it. And it is infuriating.
Jokes about black kids being fatherless, desensitized us to the fact that they were taken by the government. A 414 where my summer spent, in my grandma's basement with my cousins counting money, steady thumbing it. And I ain't know my cousin was a dealer till my mama said, all I know is big cuz held me down with the ice cream man. All I know is big cuz feed the hood when the mamas can. Economics man, investing in Ronald Reagan's contraband, chasing that dirty money, got him that black discipline. Whoopings derived from whippings, learn from the white man, huh? Great grandma went and got a twitch up off that branch, and we just wait until it's finished, nigga. We don't never flinch. Hold up. You gotta feel me. You gotta feel me.
White liberals that Malcolm was talking about are now rebranded as the white left.
The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful than the conservative. Both want power. Being an anti-capitalist doesn't exempt you from this. We've seen white leftists be friends with white conservatives. We've seen white leftists be racist, sexist, anti-Semitic. I've seen white leftists regurgitate conservative phrases as if they're the truth, such as, isn't that the girl that said watching anime is racist? The dangerous thing about a lot of white leftists is a lot of their politics aren't rooted in wanting to liberate black people, people of color, women, because that's just like the caring, good thing to do. It's all about power, and that's why we see so many white leftists coming from the alt-right pipeline. When you're part of the boys or the alt-right, it's a lot of poning the feminazi bitches. Then in leftism, the attitude is the same. It just shifts to dumbass conservative can't define communism, or owning the libs. Politics is just their vessel for superiority. It's what Malcolm X talked about, except they can cover it up by saying, no, 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 I hate libs. I want to eat Karl Marx's ass.
Fam, how can you claim to be a super straight when you've never been super at anything? No, aside from being super ugly.
So in most cases, the owner himself owned the store. You're not leaving my farm until you pay me what you owe me in voluntary servitude. I didn't volunteer to work here. I'm forced by gunpoint. I'm forced by laws. There's no way out for me.
I was held enslaved in Pike County, Mississippi. From Pike County, Mississippi to parts of Louisiana.
Maywall and her family escaped from slavery in 1963. 1963. At the time, they were unaware that slavery had ended.
This woman is known as one of the rudest in the world. She was arrested for a poem about Ugandan President Museveni's oppression, calling him a pair of buttocks and describing her wish that his mother's vaginal canal had squeezed him to death. This is Dr. Stella Nanzi, and she is an outspoken radical queer feminist known for her activism, vulgar poetry, and naked protests where she would whip out her titties for the sake of a point. Museveni has been in power for over 35 years and his rule is widely criticized as a dictatorship. This January saw a deadly and violent victory as he secured another term as president amidst a nationwide internet shutdown and suppression of mass protests. After she was released from prison, Stella ran for a seat in parliament. She criticized that it is as if many of the women who enter government suddenly have their vaginas closed and grow a penis and forget all about women's issues. She promised to be the change needed but did not win her seat, and a week after the vote, her partner was violently abducted from his car and she was forced to flee the country.
We need to talk about what's going on in Uganda. Uganda had an election in January between Bobi Wine and Yoweri Museveni. Yoweri Museveni has been ruling Uganda since 1986, and he is credited with bringing stability to the country, but many feel like he's been ruling for too long. Bobi Wine is a pop star turned politician who says that he advocates for the youth, members who felt like they've not been represented before, and for the working class. Museveni ended up winning. Bobi Wine claimed that the election had fraud in it. And Bobi Wine has been arrested multiple times before and after the election. And protests about his arrests and the election have led to over 50 deaths in Uganda. The stability of Uganda is not important just for Uganda, it's important for the world. South Sudan receives most of their food and other resources through Uganda, and Uganda is a key ally in fighting Islamist groups like Al-Shabaab.
I often feel that terms like intersectionality are scoffed at by the general public for being too woke or inaccessible, but they're becoming increasingly important. Intersectionality is the concept that two different groups can overlap to create a new group that faces unique types of discrimination. For example, Asian women face types of discrimination unknown to white women or Asian men. And the reason I'm talking about this is because after 8 people, 6 of which were Asian women, were killed in Atlanta, I saw a lot of people on the right saying, well, this couldn't have been a racial hate crime because this guy had a sex addiction and fetishized Asian women. But this is where intersectionality is the most important. The government's fetish for Asian women was racialized misogyny. If some angry incel killed a white woman, we would all consider that a misogynistic hate crime. And if some guy killed an Asian dude because he didn't like Asians, we'd all consider that a hate crimes against Asians. However, when Asian women are attacked, instead of recognizing that these two types of discrimination are combined into one hate crime, we act as if the two cancel each other out.
Acts and hate crimes towards Asian Americans are done by African Americans, both economically and socially. This goes against liberal, democratic, and BLM agenda, which controls most of the media. So in short, they don't care about your story because it ruins theirs.
I don't know why people continue to fail to understand this. It's oftentimes when white Americans are talking about the hate crimes that are happening within the Asian American community, they point towards black people or BLM saying, when it was one of yours, you made it a whole big deal and it was a trend. When it was one of them, you aren't keeping the same energy. First of all, something cannot become a trend or mainstream until white America or big corporations will it to be so. So I don't know why you keep pointing the finger at us when you should be pointing the finger at yourself. BLM only became a widespread thing when it, 1, became appealing enough for big corporations to profit off of it, and 2, which granted you mentioned, when it became appealing enough for the Democratic Party to get votes off of it. Both of which aren't contingent on the role of black America. So if you want to see the same energy that you saw with BLM, the only thing that we can do is hopefully talk about these issues enough so that they become appealing enough for the higher ups to profit off of it. And it's sad that our movements have to become mainstream and a trend in order for them to be recognized by the national media. But in this capitalistic two-party system, that's the only means we can go by.
And hate crimes towards Asian Americans are done by African Americans, both.
The model minority myth. A myth that states that Asian Americans are smarter, more hardworking, and therefore more socioeconomically successful. This was created by the white man to divide POC. Asians were used as a pawn to push this country's anti-blackness. That statistic doesn't even apply to Southeast Asians. We are not smarter than anybody else. We're just prioritized by the white man. So why bring up Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter is a necessary movement that highlights a very important topic. What individuals choose to do to my community does not take away from the fact that Black lives fucking matter. You as a white man are in no position to weaponize my community's issues to justify your anti-blackness. This divisive behavior is exactly why POC unity does not exist. Do not speak on any community's issues if you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm so glad you brought up an almost 2-decade-old and biased statistic from one police department, despite there being anti-Asian hate crimes happening across the country and the police being known for fabricating their statistics to be anti-black. I exist outside of the internet, and I will always defend my community. Don't know if you knew that people actually have lives outside of the internet, but what I'm not tolerating is for people to weaponize my community's issues to push their anti-black agenda. You can uplift your own community's movement and your own community's issues without downplaying another. You can do that without even mentioning another movement. And if you're so upset about the lack of representation I have on my account, where are your posts about it?
Reason in the United States successful economically, but others are not. This is because of culture, not the system.
So I know you say you didn't want some high school kid telling you that you're wrong, but how are you going to be this wrong? At your big age. You mentioned Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Indian Americans, Nigerian Americans, but you neglect the system that they immigrated under. Most of the people from those countries immigrated on employment-based visas, and the United States is very selective of who we give employment-based visas. They only go to the highest educated, highest paid people. So yes, of course that is going to produce economic disparities between those groups and African Americans. But the thing that I hate most about people like you is that you act as if culture and institutions are entirely separate. As if redlining and systemic poverty did not lead to gang culture. As if low college attainment is not linked to systemic poverty and underfunded public schools. Your argument is stupid, but I got a question. Do y'all like my outfit? I think the skirt is cute.
What are two clips that give off the same energy?
Effective next Wednesday, all businesses of any type are allowed to open 100%.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Straight guys will be homophobic and then seek male validation.
He said straight guys will be homophobic and then seek male validation. Because, you know, education is elevation, and today we're going to be exploring homoeroticism. And just for clarity, homoeroticism, or to be homoerotic, is not necessarily homosexual. Rather, it exists as a tension between heterosexual norms and expectations of natural attraction between members of the same gender. Think about heteronormative structured spaces like the booty club or passion parties, where arousal or eroticism is being centered with the same experience of the same gender. Like we all gonna be hard at the same time. Or like how some straight men seek male validation by trying to impress other dudes by the women that they date. Being real, it's a lot of homoeroticism that's structured into heteronormative spaces like rap music, sports teams, trap house, and the frat house. Homoeroticism is that male interaction that appears homosexual in nature, but is acceptable and not considered homosexual by other men because it is done in socially appropriate spaces like basketball, smack you on your ass.
Tell me about a time that you got fired from your job for an actual good reason.
Listen to this. So I used to work at an eyeglasses place, and these people rip you off. The lenses that people are paying $500 and up for, we pay like 30 cents. Glasses, whether Gucci, Versace, Ray-Ban, I mean just whatever you prefer, they're all plastic and we pay $5 to $20 for them, and you pay $600 and up. So I was a sales rep and I had to sell these glasses, and I would see the saddest people come in. People that desperately needed glasses but were like on Medicaid, didn't have money. It would literally fuck me up because I knew how little we were paying and I knew that they like couldn't afford it. So I started stealing just like regular plastic glasses, not name brand or anything. And I started working with like my lenses tech. We just started making these kids glasses for free. We got caught up and got fired, but fuck capitalism.
Damn it. Being homeless is a choice. Not their own choice, but people who have the power and money to end homelessness today choose not to. We don't even know how many homeless people there are in the United States. And it's not because we can't find out or that it's too expensive. It's not. We just don't care. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it can be totally eradicated for $20 billion annually. That's a fifth of what we spend on our pets every year. There are about 10,000 unhoused families in New York City and about 20,000 vacant apartments and condos in Manhattan alone. And housing is just one part of the equation. 45% of people without homes have mental health conditions, which without resources can lead to self-medicating through drug use. But instead of treating mental illness and addiction, politicians figured it was cheaper to criminalize homelessness by making it illegal to panhandle or loiter, thereby shifting their status from being sick and needing help to being criminals and needing punishment. And by and large, the police who dole out that punishment are not even remotely trained to deal with mental illness. Which is why in San Francisco, for example, most of the people who are killed by police are mentally ill. Did they deserve to die because they were suffering from a medical condition? Or did they die because as a society we've made peace with the idea that instead of spending less than 1/10% of our GDP on ending homelessness forever, we figured it was easier and cheaper to just ignore it and let the cops kill the ones who needed the most help.
17 when I feel like I'm grown, I was locked up, wound on my own. I was locked up, wound on my own. Ain't no one.
I'm gonna be honest with y'all for a second. It can be so exhausting to be a black girl. Like, we are very tired right now. Like, I know I spent all day yesterday trying to figure out what I was going to post for International Women's Day, and I was just too drained to do anything, so I just did nothing. And I know I've seen black girls everywhere talking about just how like drained they are and how tired they are, and like we're asked to make content, so we put all this energy into making content and it doesn't go anywhere. We talk about how bad our mental health is and it's like nobody cares. We talk about all the racism we're experiencing and it's immediately invalidated even though it's flooding all of our comment sections, and it's just so exhausting to be asked to give and give and give, and in return we just constantly get dogged on. Like, I know I spent all afternoon yesterday crying because another black girl talked about how sad and how lonely she felt and just how she felt really abandoned and unheard. And it occurred to me, like, what is the point of us trying to put so much energy into saving the world if we're just going to be alone in it? I don't know. All I know is that a lot of black girls are very tired right now. So if you are a black girl, know that I love you. And if you're not a black girl, go tell her that you love her, because we need it.
Hi, are we all on? Okay, good. I'm excited to announce that we will be launching our new concealer this month. So this is a pretty high price point item for us, so we are just going to be launching with the medium to deep tones only. We want this product to be available to people who can afford it. Is Megan on? Megan, can you do a little research for us? Are European Americans even buying makeup? Well, my Sephora is pretty suburban and I never see any European Americans in there, so I would like to know that research. You're right, Marquisa. There's also that loss prevention and security element with the lighter shades. Anyway, I think this product will be a hit with the core beauty audience for sure.
That I'm still reaping the blessings of everything these people did 100 or 200 years ago, then why would...
This video got me thinking. He goes on to say that it's only logical to assume that the descendants of the slaves buried in that cemetery 100, 200 years ago are still enduring the repercussions of what their ancestors had to go through. And I wanted to find a statistic that would represent what he was talking about. I thought about generational trauma, but there are still naysayers when it comes to that. So I decided to look at the generational wealth gap between Black families and white families in America. And specifically looking at the top 10% of both of those groups, the median family income for white Americans is almost $1.8 million. And in contrast, for Black families, it's $340,000 roughly. Think about that. And then I got on to what's the biggest way to acquire wealth in this country? Owning property. I'm gonna figure out what this is all about. Follow me if you want to figure out what I've...
Me showing the racism in the infrastructure in New York City. This is in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. These are Tompkins projects. Looks like a jail courtyard preparing us for jail. A deli. So this is now me walking to show y'all. Another deli. Garbage everywhere. A liquor store. A check cashing place because they don't want us to have bank accounts. Another deli. A pizza. Another deli. But not one grocery store. Dirty projects that they're supposed to be clean. This is Sumner. By the way, another deli, another Chinese food store. Smoke shop. Burger King, McDonald's, Popeyes. Mind you, they don't got now one grocery store, another smoke shop. Now I'm going to Williamsburg, a white neighborhood in Brooklyn. Grocery stores. All these health food stores, all these hippie little stores. And now I don't see not one deli.
So a lot of white people are like, oh my God, like Black people make everything a race issue. So-and-so makes everything a race issue. And I just want it to be known that if you look hard enough, you can find racism attached to almost everything in society. Not just American society, but like predominantly Western societies. Racism is somehow, some way attached to it. Ergo, y'all need to be taking that up with your ancestors and not with me. Because just because I point things out in the system does not mean that I built the system. You're mad at me for seeing. You need to be mad at your ancestors for building. And you need to be mad at yourself for not deconstructing. So stop coming in Black folks' mentions talking about how y'all make everything about race when white people constructed race and perpetuates racism. Y'all need to be mad at your ancestors. Y'all spend too much time being mad at me. Be blessed.
Imperialism and the prison industrial complex. So this is Richard Ramirez, whom I recently found about from the Netflix documentary about the Night Stalker. He was a really, really gruesome serial murderer. He raped a lot of people, abused a lot of children, and I found out something extremely disturbing about his childhood. So as I'm watching the documentary, I noticed that he made a comment about how no one will understand his life. So the first thing that I wanted to do was to find out a little bit about his childhood. I go on Wikipedia to look him up, and what do I find out? When he was a child, when he was like 5 years old, he had an uncle who tortured, raped, and murdered women. And his uncle would show him the images of all of these women that he had tortured, raped, and murdered. Guess where his uncle was? In Vietnam. Guess how his uncle got there? Through the American military. Part two. So we talked about how Richard Ramirez's uncle, Mikey Ramirez, was a veteran of the Vietnam War, and he murdered, tortured, beheaded Vietnamese women, took pictures of it, and showed it to Richard Ramirez when Ramirez was a child. Well, Mikey Ramirez would end up going on to murder his wife, and Richard Ramirez would be right there to witness the murder of his aunt. It is reported that Richard Ramirez would go on to target Asian women and white women in his killing sprees, but also he would murder women in the same way that he had witnessed his uncle murder his wife. And this is what abolitionists are talking about. People aren't just violent. People are shaped by violence. And how does American imperialism shape, cultivate, and reproduce violence domestically and internationally? Because there's a direct link between incarceration and war.
That doesn't change the fact that drone strikes are devastating.
Devastating to who? The terrorist whose
I watched his video for context, but let's talk about why drone strikes are bad. All of my sources will be linked in my bio. But firstly, even if this drone strike specifically didn't kill any civilians, it's a bad precedent to set because historically, 90% of casualties from US drone strikes are civilians. But secondly, drone strikes increase anti-American sentiments, and 16% of all terrorist attacks are directly in retaliation to drones. But thirdly, they serve as a fundamental recruitment tool for terrorist groups, now able to pry on the fear that a tyrannical US may bomb their home. Without drone strikes, terrorist groups wouldn't be able to find people to commit terrorist acts for them. But fourthly, alliances between two separate terrorist groups now consolidate, which increases the size of these groups. But fifthly, it brings a younger leadership to terrorist groups who are now more radical because they've seen US violence. And sixthly, and most importantly, terrorist groups are now forced to find new safe havens away from US strikes, meaning they move into more urbanized areas. It is this factor that means that terrorism becomes regional or international instead of being contained to small towns or cities.
The US and the EU have teamed up to make sure that the global south will not be able to import and manufacture the vaccine for cheap. This is absolutely devastating for the global south, who has been fighting for this for a long time. The colonial powers told the global south not to distract themselves with such things. Absolutely disgusting. Western imperialism in the 21st century is horrible. It involves economic warfare and blocking countries from getting vaccines for their people. Imperialism and colonialism are evolving, but the method of destabilizing countries and hurting their civilianry for the purpose of keeping countries in poverty and extracting their resources has remained the same.
Mr. Speaker, one of the earlier speakers said, this is the most dramatic change in labor law in 80 years. And I say, thank God. In the late 70s, a CEO made 35 times the worker. Today, it's 300 to 400 times the worker. And our friends on the other side running around with their hair on fire. Heaven forbid we pass something that's going to help the damn workers in the United States of America. Heaven forbid we tilt the balance that has been going in the wrong direction for 50 years. We talk about pensions, you complain. We talk about the minimum wage increase, you complain. We talk about giving them the right to organize, you complain. But if we were passing a tax cut here, you'd be all getting in line to vote yes for it. Now stop talking about Dr. Seuss and start working with us on behalf of the American workers. I yield back the balance of my...
The truth about history, and I'm talking about the history that they teach us in school. They lied to us. Most of the history that they teach us in school is not real. Some of it never happened. Some of it, they flip the entire story. And some of it is just used to brainwash you. It's nothing more than stories. History. His story. They show us the truth in subliminal messages. It's literally in the name, his story. It is based off of lies. First of all, let's talk about Christopher Columbus. Our schools taught us that Christopher Columbus is a hero, that he discovered America. We even have a whole day dedicated to Christopher Columbus. He is not a hero. Christopher Columbus is a murderer. He did not discover America. America was occupied by the melanated indigenous people, and Christopher Columbus and his crew came and slaughtered them, and then took the land. Can anyone tell me what happened before slavery? No, you can't, because schools lie to us. Why does African American history always start with slavery? What happened before? They will not teach you that, because they don't want y'all to know the truth. I'm telling you, wake up. Y'all like and follow for part 2.
Actually, we don't. We actually live in a society where Oregon noticed that students of color were falling behind in math and there was performance gaps, so they decided to see what would work better, and they told teachers that a more effective teaching method to bridge this gap where students of color were falling behind is to have kids verbally show their work as opposed to, writing it out. It's just a more effective teaching method. We also live in a society where no one canceled Mr. Potato Head because a company decided to add a gender-neutral option along with a rebranding that would include Mrs. Potato Head, which they've had for years without any outrage. What also happened is that you took a joke from Twitter about Paw Patrol being propaganda and canceled, and you turned it into outrage. What you're doing in all of this is you're manufacturing outrage to make yourself seem like the sensible one, how we're all mad. But if you actually look for outrage about any of these things, you find very little of any of it, because this is all just propaganda and you're more mad than we are.
Lord have mercy. Damn, this is some scary shit. Oh, I am scared.
Okay, I couldn't stitch the video because the music would be playing in the background, but yeah, pause to read. It's the way that I said I would talk about this video when I got back, but then I forgot. White people have left comments like that on my videos so many times, trying to make me feel guilty about the fact that I make race-related content, saying things like, oh, I grew up around black people and everything wasn't about race. We didn't have a concept of race. And I just be looking at them like, did y'all not have a concept of race, or did you not have a concept of race? Was racism really not a problem when y'all were growing up? Or were black people dealing with racism from racist white people that you didn't know, and possibly even dealing with racism from you because you can say and do racist things without knowing that they're racist, but then they had to endure it and not talk about it because they knew that you wouldn't understand as a white person? Because if we want to get specific, I know that I'm right. White people are so blinded by their privilege of not having to worry about race and racism, so they think everybody has that privilege when in reality, their black friends did not have it.
I hate you for existing, and I hate everybody like you for existing, and I will do everything in my power to disadvantage you and make things as hard for you and people like you as possible. Damn, bro, that's pretty fucked up. I don't think I like you very much. Whoa, that's a bit intolerant, isn't it? I mean, I'm just out here sharing my beliefs. Your beliefs are hateful against a lot of people and cause harm to people. You can't judge me for my opinions. Why not? What else would I judge you for except your opinions, except what you believe and think, your values and morals? I am shocked and appalled at the amount of oppression that I am facing right now.
If you're a person in power in America, a cop, a judge, a legislator, a congressman, a billionaire, and you think you can still spread corruption and push minorities down, this message is for you. You're probably right. You probably can for a little longer, but soon enough, I'm coming at you through every legal channel possible. I'm going to make it my career mission to tear down everything you've ever built. And you've never met anyone like me. So get ready, because I don't want it to be easy. I want to make an example out of you.
The Insane Life of Julie Daubeny, the 17th century sword-fighting bisexual opera singer. She scandalized France by cross-dressing like a man and fencing, which she was so good at that once a man she beat refused to believe she was a woman, so she ripped off her top and asked the audience to judge for themselves. She became a star of the Paris Opera, but that didn't stop her from fighting in duels where she killed at least 10 men. At one point, she had a death warrant out for her, but the king found her so entertaining, he pardoned her. She also loved to seduce women. She once took vows to enter a convent just so she could have sex with one of the nuns before she burnt the whole convent down.
Okay, so I worked for the census last summer, and let me just say it is incredible how much information people will give you if you just have a clipboard. Like, I basically went door to door with a fucking help me steal your identity questionnaire, and everyone just went along with it. It was just really interesting to see how people would answer the questions, though. Like, when I asked people their race, like white people, it was like they hadn't until that very moment considered that they were anything other than just default. Like, I had to read through the entire list of races and they'd just be like, I guess I'm white. Whereas black people would just look at me like I was a fucking moron. Like, I'm sure they've had so many things assumed about them every single day of their lives because of their race, whereas I was the only person in America who was contractually obligated not to make assumptions. With nationality, though, it was totally flipped. Like, for white people, like, you should have seen those happy little crackers dance. Like, they break out the fucking family photo albums and make me do advanced calculus just to figure out what percent of what they were. Whereas black people, you know, had their ethnic history totally obliterated by slavery. Just another way this country deprived an entire race of humanity.
Bitch. Noun. Definition. A woman who doesn't give men what they want.
The first person who tells me stop acting like a bitch is my father. Because good daughters keep their voices low and their smiles sweet.
A man at Kinko's tries to explain the copier to me. I laugh, tell him, I know how to use the copier, I just need more paper. He mutters under his breath,
Jeez, you don't have to be such a bitch about it. I'm seen as the battle axe around the office. In my coworkers' emails, I see the word bitch spelled out in the white spaces between their words.
My ex-husband has never called me bitch in front of my daughter, but it hides in his teeth when he calls me bully.
I've never considered myself pretty, so when
You're ugly anyway, bitch!
hits my back, it doesn't bounce off.
The week my friend Evan died, a coworker tells me, you must be on your period because you're usually not such a bitch. When you call me bitch, you give me permission to show you what that means.
I begin to shake for no reason.
In this country, they'll tell you you're innocent until proven guilty. Unless you're Purvis Payne, then you're guilty with proof of innocence. Purvis Payne is currently on death row for a crime he more than likely did not commit. And I find it disturbing that the police would even tell him, you think you're black now? Just wait until we fry you during his interrogation. Purvis had no priors, but they called him an animal. Said he was in a drug-fueled frenzy with no evidence, and they didn't test him. Withholding, losing, won't allow or won't test DNA evidence. Constitutionally, Purvis Payne should not even be on death row. With his proven intellectual disability, Shelby, Tennessee has a history, and if they can't have strange fruit, they'll put your ass in the chair. And in 25 days, April 9th, they're gonna proceed with a modern-day lynching. They're gonna put him to death. All over our social media, we need to use the hashtags Purvis Payne, Justice for Purvis. Make a video bringing awareness. If you can't, share this. Do edit, stitch it. Stand with me and MLK the Third, calling for clemency for Purvis Payne.